Still nighttime. I went to sleep a couple of hours ago and I've woken up and nothing has changed. It's a reflection of what I've seen and heard over the past week and indeed over the past few months and over the past 4 years, which is nothing's changed. Nothing's fundamentally changed. I am struggling to think of a single person I've spoken to, and I spoke to many people over the last week and over the last months and years who voted for Trump. And I think I can count one person yesterday who I met in Ohio who voted for Trump in 2016 and was not sure which way he was going to vote this time. Every single other person I know and have spoken to who voted for Trump was intending to vote for him again. But I also didn't meet that many people who voted for Trump who didn't vote for Trump in 2016 and were planning to this time. And if you look at that the numbers bear out. There've been more people voting overall. It looks like more people voted for Trump than they did last time, and more people voted for the Democrat candidate than they did last time. But the lines haven't fundamentally shifted. And again, what I heard from natural or potential Democrat voters was deep unenthusiasm for Biden and Harris. We don't have a Senate that's had a decisive result. It's stayed pretty much where it was, which means that whoever the next president is, particularly if it's Biden, there's no mandate for change in this country. It's a deeply, bitterly divided place where both sides neither trust the other to respect the result, to behave in a fair and equitable way, to listen, to not be biased, to not be polarized. Yeah. Nothing's changed. The resounding message I got on both sides and from everyone in the middle was, we expect trouble. We expect neither side to behave well. The bartender last night in downtown Columbus was explaining why they were closing up shop early. And, she said, if Trump wins, we expect instant action and disturbance. If Biden wins, we're worried about, the folks coming in from the country in a day or two with their guns. And she, as many people I've spoken to across the swing state of Ohio in particular, expressed neither side is going to accept the result. Both sides are going to cause trouble. And it's really sad. What I find really interesting is that when you speak to people in Republican majority areas, they are confident and friendly and happy to tell you what they think and welcoming and open about their views. And the same is true in predominantly Democrat-controlled areas. But when you speak to people who feel as though they're a minority within their community or their context, they're fearful, they're angry. Yesterday in Cincinnati, I was speaking to a Republican canvasser who wouldn't speak on camera and was furious. She was one of the most angry people I've met in this entire trip. And I said to her, isn't it great that the turnout is so high? And she basically said no, because they're all going to vote for the fucking Democrats. And that's not good. That's not good for our country. That's not good for freedom. That's not good for democracy. But she wouldn't speak on camera. She spoke, we had to speak a great distance from the lines. And none of her friends would speak to me either, who were all there canvassing and holding up megaphones for Trump, because they felt they were a persecuted minority. And I really do believe that on both sides, people believe they are persecuted, that they're in the minority, they're being censored, they can't be heard, the establishment is against them, and the establishment won't convey their views accurately or fairly. And that's really extraordinary, really striking. Those views have been expressed on both sides. And there's real bitterness and anger and rancor and mistrust on both sides. Fundamentally, it's about people across this country not feeling heard, not feeling like their needs or views or life experiences have been addressed, right? That they're raging against a system which they personify as each other, the other side, the Democrats, the Republicans. And there's a massive fight going on, which different people characterize in different ways, but there's a sort of enemy, there's an otherizing which is happening on both sides. And actually most people I speak to express like feeling like they're somewhere in the middle, right? People who voting Trump or voting Biden, doing so unenthusiastically, feeling like they don't really identify as Republican or as Democrat, call themselves independent, and don't feel as though any candidate or any platform really represents them. So they've made a choice which is kind of uncomfortable and unsatisfactory. And again, you can see that in the results that are borne out. I don't think, yes, I've met very enthusiastic Trump supporters. I've met a lot of very convinced and committed former Republicans who are now voting Democrat. And I've met a lot of very unenthusiastic Democrat voters on the left. It's not, the majority of the people I've spoken to are not excited by their choice and not convinced by it, and not pleased with the options that have been put in front of them. And again, I think you can really see that in the result. I think this country is in for a really, really long, hard, traumatizing, damaging experience because of the pandemic that's raging all around us. And it's not just the public health crisis, which is still absolutely phenomenal in terms of its scale. But it's the long-term economic damage that's going to be reaped from it as well. And it's an absolute tragedy that neither the Republicans or the Democrats have really solid and convincing answers to. There are Democrats who run on a platform for better provision of healthcare, and I think that's absolutely one of the answers. But there's going to be long-lasting damage caused not only by the pandemic, but by the longer term factors which have led us to this point. And the toxic combination of those two things is going to wreak real damage on this country. And neither side are presenting particularly convincing answers that people can get behind. So I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. One of the things that's really striking is, having gone back to the city where my father grew up, Louisville, Kentucky, and having spoken to Black Lives Matter activists who've been occupying that city for months and months, ever since Breonna Taylor was killed, and speaking to many people across the country about their reaction to that movement. It's really clear that Black Lives Matter has inspired a new generation of social justice leaders. And it's a movement in terms of size and scale and ambition that this country hasn't seen for a generation. And it has absolutely been a catalyst for more political engagement and action. On the other hand, it sparked a really fierce backlash, and it's sparked a backlash not only amongst people who self-identify as conservative or who deny that there's a problem with racism or a need for racial justice in the United States, but I think at a more fundamental level, it's really challenged the myths about this country, about what people say America is and was, and the sort of fundamental underlying narrative about what this country is and has been and always was and still is. And I think that there are many people I've spoken to who agree that there is a problem with racism in this country and say they support racial justice, who are deeply offended by and put off by Black Lives Matter, and challenge the idea that there's structural racism in this country, because to do so is to challenge the fundamental premise of this country. And there are lots of people who are just not willing to do that yet, and are really put off by the ideas that Black Lives Matter are putting forward, and really fundamentally in their soul and their core find it very challenging and very, very hard to accept the fundamental premise of the movement. And I think that's probably been a big factor in this election. A necessary and important and very difficult conversation is going to be incredibly messy and incredibly difficult and incredibly divisive for a very, very long time.